In today's episode of Today in World War II, April 17th, a British cruiser off of Norway poops the bed. A French general, very famous general, manages to escape from German captivity. Nimitz agrees with Rochefort about the next Japanese attack. The Germans discover, a mass grave of Polish officers. The Soviets, of course, insist that it wasn't by them. It was your fault. No, you. No, you. No, you. Uh, and finally, the Germans effectively abandoned and said, "Sorry, Holland, our bad." In 1945. Let's get started. Okay, so on April 17, 1940. So it's been, about almost not quite 10 days since the Germans attacked Norway. Things are going their way. There's some setbacks, but in general, things are going well. The British Navy's, doing okay. They missed their chance in the first day of the war. Now the Germans were entrenched, was going to be much, much harder. In fact, it would be mission impossible for them. Sorry, Tom Cruise. And on this day, the HMS Suffolk, a cruiser, decided it was going to go after the German airfield of Sola at Stavanger. Well, some a little bit of problems here. The Suffolk's Walrus seaplane was supposed to drop flares over the airfield, but unfortunately, it was shot down and very early in the bombardment, which meant that the shelling was very inaccurate, and it only destroyed four aircraft. After the sunrise, and the Luftwaffe had its turn, and the Luftwaffe, didn't have any Walrus float planes shot down to help it. It hit the Suffolk repeatedly with bombs, and it was heavily damaged. It would be put out of action until February of 41. Well, I think that there's some karma going on here. And, I'm going to refer back to some videos I did previously. You got to be careful what you name things because, I don't know. Let's look at a walrus. A walrus is very big, it's huge, full of blubber, right? It's long teeth coming out. If it's me, I'm looking at manifestation or karma, not sure that I want my dainty little float plane to be named the Walrus, you know? Unless maybe they're foreshadowing John Lennon, the Beatles, possibly. Who knows? Only time will tell, or it won't. On April 17, 1942, French General Henri Giraud, who was a prisoner of war at this time, he was being imprisoned at Königstein Fortress, which you got to think that's a pretty hard place to escape from. Well, Henri was able to escape from his castle prison, and he made it out of German occupied territory, went to North Africa, and for a while, he would become co-commander in chief with Charles de Gaulle. Well, you knew Charles was not gonna, or Charles, I should say, was not gonna let that lying down. So he wouldn't take that lying down. So there was a death match. Well, not really a death match, but I'm exaggerating. But eventually, it was a power struggle. Okay, and eventually, de Gaulle would become the overall commander in chief of all Free French forces. By the time the invasion of Normandy happened. So, and then of course, we know what happened to the rest. And it's good because de Gaulle gave that famous saying about the French. He says, "What can you expect from a people who have 300 and something different types of cheese?" And I think that is the most apropos description of the French that I've ever read. But don't get me wrong, I love the French. I think the French are awesome. I'm not one of those stupid Americans who doesn't like the French because they have their own opinions about things. Good for them for having their own opinions, right? I guess most Americans feel like the only people should have opinions are the men, and the women should be quiet in church. Ah! Okay. On April 17, 1942, Chester Nimitz accepted codebreaker extraordinaire and head of the code breakers extraordinaires, his team, Joseph Rochefort, accepted his hypothesis or his summation that he felt that there was a German, or in German, why do I keep saying German in the Pacific? Japanese were using a location code in their wireless intercepts or radio intercepts. It was called RZP, Roger Zebra Patrick or whatever, RZP. And Rochefort surmised that they were talking about Port Moresby in New Guinea. And so he went to Nimitz and said, based on all of these criteria, we believe that it's the next attack, major attack, is going to be in Port Moresby. Good for Nimitz for not, um, I don't know. I mean, he wasn't the expert, right? You got your expert here. You delegate your authority to them, and you give them the freedom to work and come to you with their conclusion. A lot of commanders would doubt, and they would take other reasons or arguments to talk themselves out of it. But Nimitz was very good about that, and we're going to see here with Port Moresby and with Midway. So the fact that we now could make a very good educated guess that they were going to go for Port Moresby. Now we had the time to allocate the resources to meet them. And as we'll see coming up next month, we're going to see the result. And it's a good result for us. And on April 17, 1943, as I mentioned just a few days ago in our video series, the Germans had uncovered a mass grave near Smolensk, and they surmised it was, Polish officers who had been shot. They publicized this, and the Soviets, of course, said that it was done by the Germans. We would never do this. We don't have a system of gulag. We didn't have purges where we'd shoot people in the back of the head in Lubyanka. We would never do this, right? Well, the Polish government in exile in London requested that the International Red Cross would investigate the matter. But as we've seen the behavior of the International Red Cross in Ukraine, you might as well just pick your nose. It's for all the good it's going to do. But what else are they going to do, right? They had no power, they had no leverage. The Germans covered that territory. If they didn't, when they pulled back, the Soviets were going to be there. So there was never going to be any international um, commission that could do that. Not at that time. And then finally, on April 17, 1945, German resistance in the Netherlands was effectively ended with the surrender of the Apeldoorn garrison. And I'm sure it's not pronounced Apeldoorn. Dutch, give me a break. I don't speak your language. Okay. I think it's a beautiful language. I think you have tall, strikingly good-looking women. You're have some great tennis players, but you know what? I don't know your language. Now, if you ask me to pronounce it in Finnish correctly or German, my German's a little weak, but Russian especially, no problem, man. I can do it. But Dutch, not so good. Well, whenever I think of 1945 and how horrible things were until the war ended, those parts of Holland that were not liberated by Market Garden, I got to work on my Montgomery issues, don't I? I think I need a therapist. Anyway, Audrey Hepburn lived through that, and she almost died from famine, from being starved. And bless her heart, and she's such a good actress. And wow, what she went through, what all the population went through in the areas that were not liberated by Market Garden was again just one more sin on the head of all those Nazis that perpetrated all this. And I'm a Christian, and I believe that they should burn in hell if they aren't already. Anyway, on that light note, that'll end today's video. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you tomorrow.